Hi, everyone. My name is Dawn Baisley, and I want you to welcome you to the 3rd International Ada Lovelace Day Lecture at York University. To my left is my colleague, Marisa Sterling. She is the Assistant Dean of Equity and Inclusivity, did I get that right, at Lausanne School of Engineering. And to my right is my colleague, John Dupuy, who is the Stacey Science and Engineering Library. And together, we have been the informal steering committee since its inception of the annual Ada Lovelace Day activities at York, which include the Wikipedia Editathon. So that will happen this Thursday, all day in the Stacey Science and Engineering Library. Over the years, we have relied on local speakers to be our Ada Lovelace Day lecturer, to give the Ada Lovelace Day lecture. But today, we're very, very honored to be welcoming our first international speaker, Elly Zupko, to tell us the story of these wonderful T-shirts that John and I are wearing about women in STEM, and which Marisa has helped to pay for annual raffle prizes for the Wikipedia Editathon. We always give them. We do a draw every year. So I'm going to hand over to, I'll introduce Elly briefly, and then I'll ask John and Marisa to make a couple of remarks on their thoughts on us taking this really quite international and across the GTA. So Elly Zupko is a designer. She isn't actually holding a Bachelor of Science. She holds a degree from a small liberal arts university in creative writing, I believe it was. And you have to remind me the name because it's gone out of my head. Goucher College in Maryland, with about 1,700 students. But she became famous in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics a few years ago when, in response to the head of the European Space Agency mission to land a spacecraft, the Philae lander, on a moving comet, he stepped out in front of a global audience wearing a Hawaiian shirt covered in fairly scantily clad women. Elly, being a designer, quickly photoshopped the photograph, and she started to put women's heads all over it. And she said, there, I fixed it. She took it on to be a Kickstarter event and raised a lot of money, and we support it. So it's our great pleasure to have her here. She's driven all the way up from the US with her husband and her 2.5-month-old daughter, Willow. So welcome, Elly, and I'm going to hand over to Marisa and to John just to make a couple of welcoming remarks as well, because we've done this together from the beginning.
Well, thank you very much, Dawn and John. And this is a dynamic trio with many more behind as well, the scenes. But it's a real honor to have Elly visit us, because one thing that York University is doing uniquely than many other schools in Canada is we are really focused on how we can move forward women and inclusion in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And from my perspective, being assistant dean at the Lausanne School of Engineering, with our 50-50 challenge to achieve gender parity within our school, it comes down to making culture shifts, which means it comes down to bringing awareness. So it comes down to bringing awareness of what are we doing that we don't notice we're doing that is making people feel excluded, and then how do we overcome that? And one of the things that I've noticed being in the engineering profession now for many years is that we can't do it by ourselves. So as much as the science, technology, engineering, and math fields have been working really hard around inclusion, particularly around women and gender, it's wonderful now that people are coming into this field with other perspectives, such as a designer who's noticing what's not working in these fields and how to do better. And so I'm really very grateful for the interest of others to come into the field and to help to bring awareness of what we're not doing so well and help to move us forward. And I'm also just honored as well that when Elly selected the 100 Faces, she also included Canadians, and in particular, I think it's on one of the upper shoulders, if I can find it. Let me do a little tour here. Oh, sorry, it's on the back. So right on the backbone, which is very befitting, is a memorial to December the 6th. So this is a very sad event in the engineering history when 14 women were killed in a school in Canada because they were studying engineering. So, or they were in engineering school. So the fact that that is also part and honored on this t-shirt is really important to us. So I welcome Elly very much and all of you, and I'll pass it over to John.
Thank you. I don't have much to add, other than that I would like to point out that this coming Thursday, we have the Ada Lovelace Day Wikipedia Women in Science Editathon. And one of the rationale, Dawn and I have been started talking about doing a Wikipedia Editathon about 4 or 5 years ago now, 5 years ago. And one of the things that was really drove us to want to do that was the fact that women in that women in science, women in engineering, women in technology are really underrepresented in Wikipedia. There's not enough articles, and the articles that are there aren't good enough. There tend to be more stubs. They really need a lot of improvement and expanding, and that's been kind of our project as well for the last 3 years. This is the 3rd year. To do something to actually, to have a fun activity, an enjoyable activity that actually works to make the world a better place, to get women better represented, women in the science fields better represented in Wikipedia. And one of the interesting things that's happened over the course of the last couple of years, it's actually been getting harder to find articles that need improvement. So we actually I had some help this year with one of our staff members, and it's, you know, it's the old lists of articles that need improvement themselves need improvement with new articles that need improvement. So that's actually a good thing. So we're slowly but surely making a little bit of progress.
So thank you very much for your remarks. And with that, I'm going to ask everyone to welcome Elly, and she's going to tell us all about that other shirt. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for that warm welcome. So Dawn invited me today originally to talk about the events that inspired that other shirt, the creation process, and kind of what we've done since the shirt came into existence. But I have to start by saying today, it's been a crappy couple months for women in STEM. I started drafting this talk back in March, and when I went back to finalize it for today, I suddenly found myself with all this news that I couldn't leave unaddressed. In June, Uber probes into an alleged culture of sexual harassment, ends up firing 20 employees. July, a new study documents that almost half of women of color in STEM fields feel unsafe in their workplaces. August, Google software engineer publishes a deeply sexist intercompany manifesto detailing why women don't belong in tech. September, Google employees conduct their own investigation and reveal that female employees are paid less than male employees at Google. And this month, 2 female researchers have come forward with allegations of sexual harassment in the field by a prominent Antarctic geologist. So women can go to the most remote regions of the planet and still not escape being harassed. Of course, I say it's been a crappy couple months for women in STEM with my tongue planted firmly in my cheek because, in all honesty, it's been a crappy couple centuries. But before I continue, I want to caveat my entire talk today by saying that wherever there is an environment where women face marginalization, non-binary people face it even more. My talk today is going to focus on women specifically, in large part because there is hardly any data on non-binary and genderqueer people working in the sciences. But if that is a topic that interests you, I recommend queerstem.org and the writing of astrophysicist Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein as great places to start. But for all marginalized people in STEM, it's getting better. So much better in so many ways. The kind of progress that we're seeing is something to be hopeful and excited about. But we also have to remember that progress in the aggregate doesn't matter much to the individual woman who is still facing the threat of a hostile work environment, or worse. STEM's most trailblazing women have faced barriers that we can hardly fathom today, like outright bans on working in the sciences. And today's most trailblazing women face barriers that we shouldn't have to tolerate. To honor the notable women in STEM of the past, like Ada, whom we honor today, we must honor the women of the present by acknowledging the realities of their circumstances and working to create a future where women can continue to do the vital, groundbreaking work in science, technology, engineering, and math. This means creating environments that allow people of all genders to thrive. So enough about these unhappy anecdotes. I'm here today to talk about a different unhappy anecdote. I'm half kidding. I'm here to tell you the story of how this crazy shirt resulted in a wonderful, spontaneous project to honor notable women in STEM. On November 12, 2014, the European Space Agency successfully completed their Rosetta mission, which put the Philae lander on a comet. This was the first time that humans have ever successfully landed on a comet, and it was a huge historical event. However, this historic moment was overshadowed for many by something apparently simple: a shirt. Dr. Matt Taylor was the project scientist of the Rosetta mission. He's an exceptional British astrophysicist and the author of over 70 publications. He also has a very playful aesthetic. On November 12th, he made the unfortunate choice of wearing a shirt that depicted scantily clad women in sexually suggestive poses. As Dr. Taylor was interviewed on international television that was simulcast into classrooms across the world, the shirt immediately drew criticism, particularly from women who felt it was symbolic of the type of sexism they face daily in their places of work. Women working in STEM were especially critical of the choice. It hit much too close to home for them. Science culture writer Rose Eveleth said sarcastically, no, women are totally welcome in our community. Just ask the dude in this shirt. Now, I'm not a scientist, as we said. I'm a writer and an artist first. Before I took a break to have Willow, my day job was working for a government contractor where we did substantial work with NASA. So I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to be adjacent to the amazing work that NASA is doing. So, as a science admirer, a designer, and a feminist, and I'll admit it, a bit of a Twitter addict, I jumped into the fray the best way that I knew how, with a joke. I quickly Googled famous women scientists, because honestly, I didn't really know that many. I'll say right up front, I did not know who Ada Lovelace was before I started this project. Google returned this handy result, and I pasted these new to me faces onto an improved version of Dr. Taylor's shirt. This image quickly went viral with thousands of shares, and soon people were asking me, how can I get a real version of this shirt? A lot of people. I didn't realize it before, but people were feeling a strong need to have something visible to show the world that women are making significant impacts in STEM fields. So with my husband's encouragement, I decided to try to make this shirt a reality, and I dove into this project that took me months. I started with research, of course, which led me to learn about the ongoing problems in STEM fields, problems which many of you, I'm sure, are aware of. As many of you already know, the issue is no longer with finding enough women to enter STEM. The problem is that they're leaving. Women make up about 50% of the workforce overall. They currently make up about 40% of the population who begin degrees in STEM fields, a number which has grown substantially over the past decade. That's amazing progress. But the shocking statistic is that over a timeline of 5 years, women's representation in STEM fields drops to 25%, and in some fields, like civil engineering, 12% and lower. That's 3 women leaving for just 1 who stays. That leaves these fields sorely lacking in the crucial perspectives and talents of women. But in addition to the statistics, I began to learn the real stories of these women and some of the reasons that they're leaving. I read stories like the ones I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. And as a woman living in the world, I am, of course, personally familiar with dealing with sexism and sexual harassment. But I don't think I truly appreciated just how bad it is for women working in scientific arenas, including historically male-dominated classrooms, laboratories, conferences, and in the field. And it's been going on for, well, ever. Dr. C.S. Wu's work has been deemed the most important development in the field of atomic and nuclear physics to date, notably on the experiment for disproving the law of parity. However, 2 of her male colleagues received the 1957 Nobel Prize in Physics instead. Dr. Jocelyn Bell Burnell discovered pulsars in 1967 while she was a grad student. This discovery was worth a Nobel Prize in 1974, but it went to 2 men at the university, including Burnell's advisor. Dr. Lise Meitner's work in nuclear physics led to the discovery of nuclear fission. But you guessed it, a male colleague received the Nobel Prize instead. And finally, this is Dr. Rosalind Franklin, whose work contributed directly to our understanding of DNA structure. Her male colleagues, the famous Watson and Crick, together with Maurice Wilkins, received the Nobel Prize after Franklin passed away. We don't know if her story would have been like the others, but we do know the sexism she faced while working alongside these men. I want to read you this quote from James Watson's infamous memoir, The Double Helix, a book in which he calls all his other colleagues by their last name or by a formal title, while he refers to Dr. Franklin as Rosie, a nickname she didn't even use for herself. By choice, she did not emphasize her feminine qualities. Though her features were strong, she was not unattractive and might have been quite stunning had she taken even a mild interest in clothes. This she did not. There was never lipstick to contrast with her straight black hair, while at the age of 31, her dresses showed all the imagination of English blue-stocking adolescence. Now, despite clear evidence of sexism being a real issue, not everyone agreed with the criticism over Dr. Taylor's shirt. Many thought that the outcries were disproportionate and overshadowed an important accomplishment in the mission. Many people, especially men, dismissed the criticism outright as completely without merit. But since we're talking about STEM and science, we should be taking a scientific approach. My Twitter friend, Dr. Janet Stemwedel, a PhD chemist, professor, and science writer, addressed the shirt storm by saying, "Women's accounts of their own experiences are better data than your pre-existing hunches about their experience." In other words, it's just good science to listen to women. If women are saying that sexism is a significant factor in their decision to leave a job or field, then we need to listen to that, believe it, and work to address it. Recent research across a pool of 74,000 women suggests that frequent incidents of so-called casual sexism, such as a shirt depicting sexualized women worn in the workplace, or say an office culture that tolerates sexist jokes, can be as detrimental to women's well-being as less frequent, more intense forms of sexism, such as unwanted touching or sexual requests. I drew this comic last year about what it's like to be a woman online, but it's true for the workplace too, and now I know that the research supports it. Add to this the recent research that shows that girls are facing sexism and developing identities rooted in sexist ideas at frighteningly young ages. One study published this year shows that 57% of school teachers admit to stereotyping their students according to gender, even steering some girls away from STEM-related fields. Another study released this year shows that girls can begin to see themselves as inferior to boys at ages as young as 6. Many girls see terms such as, quote, genius as reserved only for their male counterparts. Girls and women who eventually enter STEM have already surmounted years of sexism, only to enter a workplace where they're statistically more likely to face it to an even higher degree. So what we have going on here with the shirt example is actually a twofold problem. First, the images worn on that shirt in the workplace and streamed into classrooms make women and girls feel distanced from and unwelcome in the sciences. But then the problem is exacerbated when men, as well as women, dismiss their reactions, making them feel even more unwelcome and unheard. Imagine first having to face sexual harassment or even assault, and then having people either dismiss it as not a big deal or not believe you at all. That shirt and the resulting shirt storm became emblematic of this far-reaching twofold problem. So as I worked to turn my joke tweet into a reality, the significance of this new shirt, this shirt covered in women, but in accomplished women who had made enormous contributions in their field, came into much sharper focus. After my initial research, I started crowdsourcing a list of women who should be included on the new shirt. Again, so much of this was new to me, I hardly knew where to start. This turned out to be one of the most moving aspects of the project for me, as I got tweets and emails from hundreds of people working in STEM who were excited to share the stories of their personal STEM heroes. Not only did I get to know these heroes, I got to know the quote-unquote regular people working in these fields, although I'm sure they are all someone's hero, whether they know it or not. So from the long list that I crowdsourced, I pared it down to a final group. I included dead and living women, women across a spectrum of racial identities, women of varying abilities, and women who are part of the LGBT+ community. Annie Jump Cannon was the progenitor of modern star classification. She was also deaf. Sally Ride was the first American woman in space and the first acknowledged gay astronaut. Kalpana Chawla was the first woman of Indian descent in space. Alice Ball was a chemist and pharmacist who developed a new treatment for leprosy, and she was the first Black woman to graduate from the University of Hawaii. And I have to say, my shirt spotlighted one of NASA's human computers, Christine Darden, before Hidden Figures made it cool. I strove to include some of the most famous historical women in STEM, such as Marie Curie and Ada. Hypatia of Alexandria was the first woman documented to make substantial contributions to the development of mathematics. Mary Somerville was one of the first female members of the Royal Astronomical Society in Great Britain. But I also included women who are still making contributions today. Shirley Ann Jackson was the first Black woman to earn a doctorate from MIT. She is currently the president of the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and one of the highest paid university presidents in America. Joan Roughgarden is one of the world's most influential theoretical ecologists and also a trans woman. Ellen Ochoa was the first Hispanic woman in space and is the current director of Johnson Space Center. And Meg Lohman, nicknamed the real-life Lorax, is an ecologist who pioneered the science of canopy ecology. For all living women, I contacted them individually to get their permission to participate. And from Jane Goodall to Temple Grandin, almost everyone enthusiastically agreed. So I created this design, which includes 50 women, to mimic the all-over print of Dr. Taylor's original shirt. Then I launched a Kickstarter to bring that shirt to life. During the Kickstarter process, I remained in touch with the community that had come together over this project. This resulted in several important additions to the shirt. First was that during the design process, we passed the anniversary of the massacre at the École Polytechnique, which we referenced in the beginning here. This was another story that I had never heard before I connected with this community. As Canadians, you all are probably more familiar with this than I was, but if not, in 1989, a 25-year-old man killed 14 female STEM students and injured 28 other students on the campus of the École Polytechnique in Montreal after shouting that he was there to, quote, fight feminism. This was the deadliest mass shooting in Canadian history. I felt it was crucial to memorialize the STEM students who, as a direct result of the most violent form of sexism, were never able to realize their futures. Another change was that I added a Kickstarter reward tier so that contributors could ensure that the woman of their choosing was included in the final design. Catherine Lathrop was nominated by her grandson, and Faye Eisenberg-Salov was nominated by her loving students. But since we couldn't include everyone, I added this blank face, which represents all women in STEM, past, present, and future. The idea is that it can be left blank to represent this metaphor, or you can add a button or a patch with your own favorite hero. And finally, I added a QR code to the back of the shirt that takes you directly to stemshirt.org, where we have bios of all these women. Even I can't always remember who they are, and I spent months with them. So this is handy for the conversations that this shirt inevitably sparks. My modest goal for the Kickstarter was $5,000. This was enough for me to break even on a print run of the shirts. We ended up raising over $33,000. My intuition that this was something that people wanted to exist turned out to be a huge understatement. To date, we've sold over 1,000 shirts and donated hundreds more. My absolute favorite is when I get to ship out an order of the youth shirts. The shirt has become a teaching tool. It represents both our history, but also our future. The blank face reminds everyone that there is a place for them in STEM. The campaign was such a success that it gave me the opportunity to start my nonprofit organization, SMLX Good. I started the organization in part to ensure that all the revenues from this endeavor would be reinvested into projects that promote inclusivity and diversity. We've raised another $10,000 since the Kickstarter. And in addition to the shirts, we sell posters, fabric, and wrapping paper. Some entrepreneurial companies out there even offer a wallpaper, a sheet set, and a chair that's upholstered in the fabric, and I just think that's hilarious. Also, we are in the prototyping stages of a baby onesie, which a lot of people are really excited about. This is my daughter Willow on the way home from the hospital in August. So all these projects are educational in themselves. They are natural conversation starters and an important tool in SciComm. But they also sustain a revenue stream that we use to support projects, groups, and other nonprofits with missions similar to ours. These are some of the organizations we've supported. For example, we have provided free and at-cost shirts to the Lancaster Science Factory, which is a hands-on interactive technology and science center in Pennsylvania, which in turn sells the shirts in their gift shop and gets to keep the proceeds. This is a fundraising model that I offer to other nonprofits. I also donate posters to educators in classrooms, and I visit STEM clubs to talk to school children about the women we feature. To date, all of my labor for SMLX Good has been volunteer. But currently, my husband and I are designing our next endeavor through SMLX Good, which is going to be a subscription service called Good Gear. We took a break for the birth of our daughter, but we'll be launching fully in 2018. So wrapping up, there are a few main things I want you to take away from my story. One is that sexism is not something that we left in the past, and that it affects not only women, not only girls, it affects everyone. And it keeps the human race from making the discoveries, inventing the technologies, and pushing the boundaries that will allow us to reach our full potential as a part of this planet and a part of the universe. Women bring crucial and unique perspectives and talents to male-dominated fields, and that is all the more reason to foster welcoming environments. 2, listen to women and listen to girls. Their experiences are valid and they are data. Their stories are direct observation into perspectives that not everyone is able to experience firsthand. It's just good science to listen to women. And the more women are listened to, the more they'll speak and the more we'll hear. Bringing problems out into the open is the first vital step on the path to solutions to the kind of incidents I talked about at the beginning. And 3, let's be honest. These types of sexist incidents are not going to stop completely, at least not for a very long time. In light of that, we all share the opportunities and responsibilities to shape negative experiences into positive outcomes, to build on a flawed past in search of a more perfect future. This is how we honor the amazing women who blazed the trails for us and raise the children who will show us what's next. So that's it. I think we're going to do a little Q&A with Dawn. So thank you all very much. Sit up here. We'll bring the mic.
And we'll bring the mic. And John is going to wrangle a question. And we have time for everybody here to think about this. Yes, so this is going to be going online. So we have to speak into the mic to, yeah, so John, you'll run up and down. So I should be speaking into the mic because I'm not being recorded. So Elly, thank you very much. I'm excited about the chair.
It's a little cost prohibitive, but...
And the fabric. Okay, so John, would you... So first of all, thank you very much, and what a story. I have questions if there's time later. I think we'll go for about 10 minutes with questions so that we can allow people to get to their next meeting and class. So take it away, John.
So
Maybe
yeah.
you have a question.
Well, I think actually we have the first question here from Marissa.
So please introduce yourself if you feel comfortable doing that, and then I'll ask the question.
Great. Thanks. I'm Marissa Sterling. So first of all, fabulous presentation. So thank you. And thank you for backing your presentation in a scientific way. So by bringing facts forward, it's wonderful. So you said that you're a feminist, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your journey to identifying yourself in that way.
Oh, wow, that's a big question. It's interesting because on the drive over here, Dawn was asking about my college, and I went to Goucher College, which is a historically all-female college that went co-ed a couple decades ago, but it was still about 70% women. And it's a real bastion of liberal and progressive perspectives on the East Coast, and especially feminist ideas. And I had no idea when I was there. I came to feminism pretty late in the process. And actually, I think it was while I was writing my first novel in about 2011. My main character was a woman, and it's a fantasy novel, and she comes to a country where women are in charge, and she's never experienced that concept before. She just didn't realize that that was a thing. And it was kind of a metaphor for my own journey of realizing kind of what the patriarchy really was, and that it underpins so much of our reality. And I try to have patience with people who haven't come yet to feminist ideas, that it's not always something that you can recognize if you're just assuming that what your experience is normal. And once you start realizing that being sexually harassed on a daily basis is not normal. And like we've seen recently with the Me Too campaign on social media, where women are coming forward and talking about their experiences, I think more women are realizing, like, oh, it's normal for me, but it's not normal that it should be happening. So as I kind of went through the creative process and the mental process and the introspection that came through writing this novel, I started to really dwell on feminist ideas. And then the more I got interactive with social media, the more I started following thought leaders in these bubbles and following more women of color and more queer people and just self-educating myself. And the more you can educate yourself, just the more these ideas become kind of apparent. I could go on for another half an hour, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so we have another question over here.
Hi, it was a really nice talk. Robert Tashima, the chair of biology. Are you going to maybe expand this concept of women in STEM t-shirt to maybe even focus on women in mathematics, women in engineering, women in, say, biology or chemistry, just so that now, you know, this is a broad initial response to that other shirt, but going forward, now maybe young girls, women in STEM can identify, oh, I didn't know there were 100 well-known women in engineering.
That's a great question. We've been brainstorming how we could do a new iteration. It's been kind of a complex problem because, you know, there are these pillars that you want to include every time, like Ada Lovelace and Marie Curie. And there's also the flip side where not all living women want to be included in something that's so visible. I did reach out to several prominent women in mathematics, and they weren't interested in this kind of a project, and that's totally fine, and I totally understand.
Did they tell you
I didn't get a lot of reasons. Some people didn't respond. Some people just said no, thank you. I got the impression from some women that they just wanted to focus on their work, and that they didn't want to be caught up in this kind of the politics, which I don't think this is politics. I think this is reality. But some people still see this as a divisive issue, and they just want to focus on their work and be seen as a professional and not necessarily as a female professional in their profession. But to answer your question, I love the idea of kind of field-specific shirts, and I will definitely take that under advisement as we move forward. This shirt kind of by its nature is a little bit heavy on astrophysics and aeronautics, just because it came up through the ESA experience. But I would like an opportunity to showcase more women in different fields.
Hi, I'm Kate Mcpherson. I'm a feminist historian and currently working as an associate dean. So I have both the academic and the kind of administrative perspective. So really enjoyed your talk, and I'm glad we're filming it because I can think of lots of good uses for it.
Thank you.
So I have two different kinds of questions, and one is has to do with the actual material of the shirt, whether you were able to have ethical production, the relationship to the producers of the fabric, which is one end, and the other is, I think, one of what this raises is, I think, the definition of science. So there are lots of fields in which women not only were leaders but numerically dominated, but have been defined as not science. So I think about one of my areas of research is history of nursing and home economics, dietetics, sort of areas that have engaged even with what we call the natural or physical sciences that get excised out on the spectrum of what is science. So it produces a really interesting conversation about even that definition of science as it is. But anyway, those are my two parts of my question.
Sure, and those are both great questions, and they're definitely both issues that I had to tackle in doing this project. First of all, so the shirt, it was difficult initially to find any company that would do this kind of all-over print. It's kind of a complicated process. It's called sublimation dye printing, and only a few companies do it. I was really lucky to find my provider, and I'm sorry I haven't had enough coffee this morning to remember the name of the company that prints the shirts, but I do know that they get the blank shirts themselves are manufactured in Honduras, but the company does make sure that they're manufactured under good working conditions. That's the deepest I was able to go with that. We did do a print run of Hawaiian-style shirts that were buttoned up the front. They were all printed over on a silk-like fabric, and people really wanted that because it looks so much like Dr. Taylor's original shirt. But I did not love the circumstances under which they were printed. I believe they were printed in China. the fabric is printed in China, then manufactured, sewn together here in America. It wasn't as ethical as I would have liked, so we actually just did a limited run, and we probably won't be doing that again until I can find a better provider. But I was very satisfied with the way the t-shirts were manufactured. So your second question was about hard sciences versus soft sciences, or kind of the spectrum of science. So I got nominations from a broad spectrum, and I did purposely kind of focus on the, quote, harder sciences, partially because I think I was naive and thinking that that's what people wanted to see represented, without understanding that I was inadvertently truncating the representation that was allowed on the shirt. I think people were thinking maybe even ecology was too soft of a science to include, which just is insane, right? Nursing, honestly, didn't occur to me as something to be included, but definitely it should be. I think you're absolutely right. And when we go on to do future iterations and expand the women that we're profiling, we definitely want to focus on that broader definition of science.
More questions?
I'm an ecologist.
Well, are you familiar with the work of Meg Lohman, the living Lorax? She was a very interesting living scientist that we got to include.
It's not a question. I just want to applaud you, ma'am. I just 5 minutes ago saw your poster in the elevator, and here I am, but I have a 1:30 class. I just returned to school. I'm a woman who've gone through a lot of abuse decades ago, and have a second chance at York to get a second career. Because on my nursing job, I was hit by a mentally ill person. So I'm sort of, added to all the childhood stuff and moving around. I'm obviously from a different island, but I'm just in awe of you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I'm so humbled to hear that. I'm so glad you were able to join us today and share your story.
And eat fruit and take it with you. So we have, we're good, that clock is fast, so we actually have got time for a couple more questions. Comments? Mark, you have 2 daughters. Do you have a question or a comment about how this might, you have to speak in here. So Mark, who is a lecturer at York University, I happen to know has 2 daughters because Mark was my first graduate student, and they are now, one of them just started high school. So I'm curious, we could hear about a dad who's got 2 daughters who are now, and both parents did science.
That's right.
You must have something to say.
Well, one thing that I couldn't help but think of, sorry, it was, I'm wondering about the United States in particular, and if you think it's different there than in other Western countries. Because, well, like take the last election, for example, like Americans had a choice between one of the most qualified candidates who they've ever, been offered versus somebody not quite so qualified, but who happened to have a Y chromosome. I mean, Canada's never had an elected female prime minister either, so it's not that Canadians can brag about it. We have a few premiers, but not an elected prime minister. Britain's had 2. Germany obviously has a female head of state right now. But do you think in general that, sexism against women might be stronger in the US than, say, your average Western country?
I just have to caveat by saying I'm no expert. I don't know enough about how sexism is different in other countries. I will say that as the election of President Obama kind of increased racial tensions in America, the nomination of Hillary Clinton brought up a lot of issues of sexism, and I think it's really brought the conversation to the forefront more than it has been in the past. I don't think the issues are worse than they were. They're just more visible than they have been in the past, which makes them appear worse, which is good because people are finally recognizing that it's a problem they need to pay attention to. It's pretty bad in America, but I know it's worse in other countries. It's better in other countries. It's really depending on what parts of the world you're talking about, but we all have, we have to make our impact in the spheres that we can make that impact in.
Yes, Sylvia has a question. While it's going over, yeah, that's you can. We've talked since you arrived last night, and I think you and Gabe and your beautiful daughter Willow, because she was there when I was ranting. You're obviously aware that in Canada, we get up every morning and we Google what's happening or check on Twitter. We're very obsessed with this. The world is obsessed and traumatized. Okay, over to Sylvie.
Hello, my name is Sylvie Morin. I'm Associate Dean Research in the Faculty of Science, and thank you very much for the talk. It was very entertaining, and it's really interesting to see what you did coming from your background to actually pick this up and do such a good job at it. I think it's fantastic. Thank you. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on how people use this shirt? So let's say if you go to a school as a scientist, in which way, okay, if I wear it, of course, people will ask, what are you wearing or what is this about? But do you know of ways, original ways people are using the shirt to do outreach and to make an impact?
I showed a picture of Dr. Summer Ash, who appeared on the Nerdist podcast. She's she also runs the Startorialist blog, which showcases clothing that showcases astrophysics and space themes. She's a huge advocate of the shirt and wore it specifically on the Nerdist podcast to kind of bring some attention to the project, which was great because he asked about it and she got to talk about it on a pretty well-known podcast. I know people wear them to conferences. It's nice to spot someone across the room, and I think the conversations tend to start between people who already know about the project. My personal experience is actually when I wear my shirt, I don't get a lot of people coming up to me, and I think there's various reasons for that. But I have had people ask, who are these women? Once they notice that it's all women, especially women want to ask, who are they? And I can tell them a little bit of the background. I had one experience where a woman came up to me and we started talking. She's like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. My daughter is just entering school. She was a woman of color, and I think her daughter was a little nervous about entering STEM. And I think she was heartened to see this kind of positive project. An interesting thing that's come up since I've done this project is that we're kind of on a pendulum where women are starting to enter STEM more, but we're coming back a little bit because so many stories are coming out and girls are again like, do I really want to subject myself to that? So there's a kind of a flip side to the visibility aspect where the more stories come out, the more women hear them and say, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. So I think that this is kind of a visible reminder that there are opportunities to make positive projects out of the negative things that are still happening. But I know that we sell the fabric, and I know people have sewn dresses and scarves, and just it's kind of a signifier of I support this work and I support closing the gender gap, and I want to be visible about it.
Thank you, Ellie. Okay, I think we're going to... Oh, is there another question? Oh, I'm going to give Marisa the last word. Come over here so you can get into the video. I just want to say that thank you, everyone, for coming. Please take food with us, with you, I should say, not with us. And we will put the relevant information when we post this video, because the shop is opening up again. You're moving forward. You've taken a little bit of time out with the 40-year project called Being a Parent. The first 40 years are the hardest, Here is Marisa, and I'll actually turn it over to you to comment.
Well, it's a question. Sure. I'll take a seat. So this is my last question. I think what is amazing that what you've tapped into is that there appeared to be a real need for people to feel like they're part of a bigger community and a bigger movement, and that they are noticed and recognized, right? And you've accomplished this. So I was curious, what has been the response, if any, from Matt Taylor? Did you have one? And in all your following, have you been able to notice of your following, what's been the gender split of that following? So you've done a great job of building this community, and I'm curious as to how this community is able to branch out. So that's kind of the root of my question.
Okay, that's a great question. A lot of people ask me what Dr. Taylor's response was, and the answer is there was none. I don't even know that he knows this shirt existed. People wanted me to send one to him in the mail, and I have to say that I don't think Dr. Taylor's a bad person at all. I think he just made a choice that he wasn't thinking about. It wasn't a hateful decision. It wasn't a conscious decision to degrade women. It's just something he didn't think about. And that, I mean, that in itself is an issue that people just don't think first. I didn't feel it was appropriate or my place to kind of rub it in his face that he made this mistake. He got plenty of crap for what he did. He knew he made a mistake. Kind of an interesting side story is that his shirt was sewn by a friend of his, whose name is also Elly, and she spells it the same way that I do. It's such a weird coincidence. And she has kind of created a brand for herself from this shirt storm. So she went off in a different direction, kind of an anti-feminist direction, and she developed her own fan base of anti-feminists who were on the opposite side of this issue. And so I'm here on the other side. I don't like to say it's a fan base. I like to say it's a community, like you said. I haven't run statistics or anything on how many on the gender split or who all's been interested, but I've definitely seen a great amount of male representations in support of the project. Men wearing the shirt, a lot of fathers buying the shirt for themselves and for their daughters and sons as well. So it's been a very diverse community coming together over this. Did I answer everything?
Sure. Well, on behalf of York University and all the faculties that played a role in helping to bring you to our community, we're very grateful that you did. The ability to have this recorded and allow people in their own space and time to listen to your really thoughtful comments, I think is going to have a lot of legs to it. And what you're doing is more of what we need to do, which is to build that awareness and reach out to people and find creative ways to reach out to people so that we have a more collective movement. So thank you very much, and it's an honor to meet you.